Welcome to the Motogp Xtra podcast.
So 2 rounds into the Motogp 2024 season, we have a new championship leader, we've had controversies this weekend, we've had penalties, we've had plenty of different things, so we have got to try and dive into this very quickly. I'm Rhys, and joining me as always to discuss the events of the weekend is my co-host Dill. So Dill, we'll start off, go straight into Moto3, and I'll pass a question straight to you because it's just always fun to do that. What did you make of the Moto3 race, the way it started? Rhys obviously was looking really, really good all weekend. Looked quite good in Qatar, but obviously didn't pan out for him, unfortunately, with the incident. But this time, sort of tried to rectify that, tried to get away early, and kind of changed the complexion of the race a little bit by trying to make that gap and sort of stretch out the field, because Portimao is one of those more technical circuits where they can seem to do that.
Over the last kind of 10 years, you get the odd rider who can kind of make a difference. Jorge Martin, Danny Kent did it a bit. Mir did it a bit as well, where some riders could just maybe pull a gap here and there. They could bridge a gap and make it more of a kind of a higher category bike race than your standard Moto3. I feel like currently with the grid that we have at the moment, and mainly with the switch to Pirelli, it looks like that's more of an opportunity, because definitely the game plan A for Rueda was straight away just get to the front, which he did, and then he tried his best basically to break the toe. And again, you did mention Portimao is a slightly on more of a rider's track. You can see some of the better riders perform slightly different there, so it's one of those tracks where it's not always down to the equipment. Rider makes the difference, so it was definitely the game plan for Rueda to try and make a break. And again, he was quick all weekend, second year in the class, and he does look like he's made a big step. And to be fair, he almost got it perfect. It was a pretty good start from him, and again, he tried to do something different. And again, I think the Pirelli is allowing them to have a different game plan instead of just, we'll battle until 4 laps ago and then we'll just set grenades off and see what happens. It's a bit different now, where they think, well, maybe if I break them, I can get away and manage my speed and maybe have more of a different style of race. So it's a different watch Moto3 currently. It's not the knife fight anymore that it used to be, and I think we'll still have them races like Mugello where they have the long straight that will stop people getting away, but I still think that Moto3 this year and Moto2 obviously will be a lot different throughout the whole season.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be difficult for them to make those passes, like you say, that we've had in the historic Moto3 races, if you want to call them, where they're sort of constantly a big pack of 16 dive-bombing each other, because the tyres just can't retake it, can they? The tyres for the Pirellis, they have a high performance ceiling, but they also have a much higher wearing curve, so they go off pretty easy, and they're much more sensitive than those Dunlops, which could, let's be honest, do the whole season. So it definitely has been changing these Moto3 races so far. So initially it was a little bit of a longer group, but it ended up developing in sort of a group of 6. So you had sort of the 3 championship guys. I guess we're expecting sort of Rueda, Holgado, and David Alonso sort of pulling away. Ortola there as well. Joel Kelso is involved. So that was kind of the initial breakaway group. It changed a little bit in the early stage of the race. It was kind of a bit of a longer group, then a shorter one, then a bit longer again. It kind of closed up, but there's a little bit of overtaking. But generally, that front 6 sort of pulled away. And to be honest, I think that is kind of what we're going to see going forward through some of these races, especially when you get to these rounds where the tracks are a bit more rider balanced. I mean, I think you make a good point where you say Mugello, for example, there'll probably still be that kind of slipstream fest. You probably get that kind of thing maybe at Austria a little bit as well. Obviously a very basic track, it's known for being that. It's obviously not got that many corners, so it's not too hard to nail. Obviously it's a power track as well, so I think maybe it's some of the more power-sensitive circuits, which you could kind of almost argue Portimao is because of there's so much of it that's flat out. But I think because it's so tricky throughout the lap, other than that, I think it allowed this race to play out in the way that it did. But it is going to take a bit of getting used to, isn't it? Not having all these dive bombs, and also what's going to take getting used to is sort of the tyre drop off. So David Alonso, obviously the winner from Qatar, looking like favourite for the championship potentially. The way he won that Qatar race was phenomenal, but this time he didn't quite play his tactics as well, did he? He sort of fought his way to the front. He dropped back a little bit, fought his way back towards the front, but then sort of got a bit stationary and started to get eaten alive a little bit by some of the other riders in the group.
Yeah, he basically made a lot of work out of his race today. Like you said, he kind of came forward, went backwards, then to come forward again. That's maybe on the Dunlop stage you could have got away with that, and he could still maybe fall for the podium or the top positions towards the end, but it does seem now in the Pirelli era that we're moving into that you can't sit in P6 and go up to P2 and then go back to 8 and then all try and figure it out on the last laps. You have to kind of be there really from half race distance. And again, it looked like Alonso just was missing a small bit this weekend. I felt like he was, again, in hand-to-hand combat was very strong, but he just looked like he wasn't as comfortable. Now, again, you could nearly argue the same in Qatar. It was his last lap that made it such a brilliant result for him that I think the likes of Holgado, maybe Rueda as well, especially as well, I was going to give a shout out to Joel Kelso. Seemed pretty consistent today in the terms of he didn't look like he was trying to get into the battles. He looked like he tried to stay kind of consistent in the group. Ends up P5 on another day. That's a podium. But he just looks like that. He's someone who maybe has his head screwed on that you need to ride his tires a bit different. But it just looks like Alonso at the moment is kind of thinking that maybe it's a bit of overconfidence that I'm one of the better riders, I should be winning this championship, I can do what I want on these tires and not pay the price. But there was a definite tire drop. You could see with about 3 laps to go out of the final corner, just drive grip wasn't there. So it's definitely going to be something. Again, you did mention the group of 6. There wasn't a whole lot of overtaking in that group. There was a lot of wheels in line kind of following. It feels much more tactical now and not just overtake or be overtaken. Obviously, there's still an element to that with a lower CC of bike that it just kind of adds to that sort of racing. The slipstream does come into it, but it was definitely a bit more a thinking man's race, which is very unusual in Moto3. And again, when you see the tyre drop off for Alonso, you can understand why they're kind of playing that game with it. But moving into some of the more normal rounds, of course, Portimao is still a new track, really. Like, it's only been on the calendars 3 or 4 years now, so it's not really one of those tracks where they've all been to 100 million times. When we get to Jerez, for example, that's where we'll really understand, even with Moto 2 as well, what the Pirelli tyres are going to give us for the season when we get to the kind of classic European tracks. So at the moment, each race is a learning experience for the viewers, for the teams, for the riders. So there's a lot of going on, and I think it's going to be probably, again, in both classes for Moto 3 and Moto 2, the season will slowly kind of work its way out and we'll see different things happen. And maybe around halfway through the season, Sachsenring kind of time, we might start to see a trend, because at the moment, even in Moto 3, I'm kind of thinking, well, he was strong that weekend, but look, he wasn't there this weekend, and there's ups and downs already for riders, which is common. But I still think just with so many changes going on this year, the new KTM, the tyres and everything like that, that there's just a lot up in the air at the moment with this Moto 3 class.
Yeah, I think it will be. I think I said it in the last podcast that I think it'll start to settle down after the first few rounds. But yeah, I think these first few, especially we're going to Austin next, right? I mean, I know it's a bit premature to be talking about the next race when we're sort of discussing this one, but we're going there next. That's a weird track in itself. That's going to be a bit strange. That does provide some strange races. You can actually have quite a big rider advantage there sometimes because the track is so. It's kind of a bit of a mess, isn't it, the track surface? So it allows sort of maybe the dirt tracker riders, the riders a bit more comfortable with the bike moving around underneath it to make the difference. So we may see a very, very strange race there. I do slightly disagree that Portimao's a new track, because I mean they've been going there for like 4 years, but also Moto2 and Moto3 have always done a lot of testing there, even before it was on the calendar. And most riders have come through Junior GP and they race there as well.
Yeah,
so I think
true.
A lot of the teams do have probably a lot of data for it. I think it is just the fact that Pirelli's obviously are so new. Like, I think Jerez will be interesting because that'll be the first track they get to that they did extensive testing at. In that they did do obviously testing here on the Pirellis, so I guess maybe they should have known that a bit more. But Jerez, I know they did quite a lot, and they've always done a lot. So yeah, we'll have to see when they get there, because there'll be so much bike data at Jerez, so much tyre data at Jerez as well. Obviously, there've been lots of Pirelli races at Jerez over the years, so will be interesting. But this weekend, I mean, last weekend obviously it was discussed a lot because it was a big thing, like, oh, the new tyre supplier. But in Moto3, I didn't feel like it played a massive part in the race, but this time it definitely did. I feel like that it was spoken about a lot more. Obviously, we saw it visibly with Alonso. I mean, he just couldn't turn the bike to that last corner towards the end of the race, could he? So yeah, I think it definitely seemed to have a bigger impact this weekend than it did last weekend, and definitely going to be talked about more. And Moto2 was obviously quite a big impact last weekend as well, so that wasn't such a change there. But for Moto3, I think it definitely affected it more, bit more of a, I guess, a more high speed circuit, easier to wear tyres at, and probably because we saw a top rider making a mistake kind of with the tyre drop off and using a little bit too much. But 2 riders that didn't let their tyres drop. Right at the end of the race, Holgado wasn't the leader. Rueda was right behind him, and they decided to go for it. They sort of, a couple of laps to go. I think at that point, you've tried to save your tyres. Not much more you can do. Not much point trying to save the tyres anymore. You've just got to go to the end with what you've got left. And they actually made a bit of a break from the rest of them. I think that helped. That was helped by the fact that Alonso was running out of tyres, but I was quite surprised to see those two sort of just drop everybody by so much, because the whole race, really, they've been quite close and they've kind of all been keeping their cards sort of close to their chest, but basically it was almost literally as soon as they went over the line for 3 to go, like Holgado just sort of pulled the pin and they just went.
Yeah, it was a bit surprising, to be fair, that they had that much when we were kind of talking that it was a bit of a tyre race and that everyone was kind of keeping their powder dry a bit. That it was like a light switch where they went, and I also think there's a small bit of David Alonso kind of failing to believe he had no tyre and still was like, I'm going to keep going. It was kind of maybe slowing down the likes of Ortola and Kelso and Colin Vire. So I think there's probably a bit of that. Holgado and Rueda managed to pull a gap because they had more, but also that Alonso was kind of like doing his best to try and kind of go with them, but it was just making kind of more mistakes and costing other people time. So when it came to the final lap, I was probably thinking that Holgado's experience will come out on top. Half a tent he wins by, but again, no slight on Jose Antonio Herrera. It's been a very good start to his season. He is in a very good team. He's kind of in a similar situation to Holgado was in his second season last year, where it wouldn't be out of the question that he could go on a run and look like a title contender, but you just wonder, can he do it over the full season? Obviously, again, he's no questionably quick. He was very, very highly rated last year, and again this year people are expecting big things and a podium in the second race of the season. Pole position as well, so he has a lot going from it. Again, very, very young, so there's no rush really with Rueda, whereas Holgado I think now feels like he needs to make the step. I'd say deep down he probably realised it last year, he maybe threw it away slightly. I think it just kind of got to him mentally a bit last year, where I think for most of the podcasts last year we're like, well, yeah, he's doing well, he's holding on, but it was just, he wasn't kind of fighting in a championship, he was just there kind of present, he wasn't really too much of a part of it. And I think this year, obviously he's probably one of more of the favourite riders you've seen. Messiha has moved on, Sasaki's moved on, so the kind of spotlight is on Holgado to perform along with Alonso, and again, Holgado leading the championship now as well, it's a big step for him to kind of put some rounds together. But the two of them really were your probably standard riders. Again, Alonso was special, but had no tyre left, so clearly a few things for him to learn yet.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, actually, when you look at it, out of those like top guys, Holgado is the experienced one. I mean, he's only got one more season over those guys, but he also has a season of sort of fighting in that championship battle. I know, like you said, we were kind of saying a lot of last season that he was struggling or that he was just about holding on to a lead, but obviously he's kind of still experienced the pressure of being the championship leader. I mean, he led for the first half of the season. It's easily forgotten. It was only really the second half of the season that Messiha took a march against him. And then Sasaki came through. Like, he kind of faded out of the picture by the end of the season, but going into summer break, he was still leading the championship, I believe. Only just, I think, over Messiha at that point, but he was still the championship leader, so it's easy to forget. And he had that kind of pressure on him, and it was only his second season, and he had changed teams as well, because obviously he was in the IO team previously, and then moved across to the Tech 3 team, so there was a little bit of change there. But yeah, I think he's at his third season now, so he's going to have a bit more experience. Obviously, David Alonso was also kind of part of that title fight, but again, he just kind of showed up at the end. He just started winning races out of nowhere, and that kind of what put him in it. So he didn't really have the season-long expectations. And they were Rueda, to be fair. I think if you step back 5 years, maybe, you'd be raving about how good of a rookie season that Jose Antonio Rueda had last year. Very consistent. I think he did get a podium, didn't he, at one round? I can't remember exactly.
Yeah,
but I'm
he got one
certain.
podium last year.
Yeah.
And he got one pole as well, obviously, this weekend. That's his stats so far.
Yeah, so pretty good. Like I was saying, if you go back 5 years where you haven't had these Pedro Acosta coming in and winning as a rookie kind of campaigns, Guevara being very impressive, and so like you'd be saying that's a solid debut season, and he's going to go on to do some good things. So I'd expect very much for him to step up this season. It seems like he has so far, just missing out today, but to be fair, Holgado, it's kind of almost similar in a way to what Lopez did in Qatar. He just kind of rode that perfect last lap that you couldn't pass him. Like, there wasn't really anywhere to overtake him. He just defended the line perfectly. Rueda almost sort of got the run out the last corner, but we have seen before it's quite difficult to do there. If you remember, was it? Well, it must have been 2021 because it's the only year that Acosta was in it. But it's 2021. I think it was the first round at Portimao, like the one earlier in the season, where Foggia was sort of right on the back of Acosta coming through the last corner, and he was too close and couldn't drag him to the line. I think it was almost a similar kind of thing to that. He was too close to the back of Holgado to get the run to the line, but also I think I actually wonder whether the Pirelli affects that a little bit as well, because it actually maybe makes the bike accelerate better, so it's not so much about the slipstream and the top end. They get there a bit quicker. I don't know what you think about that, but I think maybe that could change the dynamic a little bit. It's obviously so early days with the Pirelli, so it's hard to tell, but I feel like, if they've got a bit more edge grip or whatever, maybe that could make a difference with these kind of last lap battles, of coming out the last corner and trying to get the run and stuff.
Yeah, it just changes everything really, because I think the new KTM as well.
Yeah, definitely.
It has a bit of dirty air about it where you don't seem to get as much slipstream. Obviously, it's kind of been reported that they've, whatever way they're faring, kind of produced the air at the back. It doesn't seem to offer much of a slipstream, and it was unquestionable round 1 and round 2 now, where it's not it's been visible. Like, that's been one of the big things.
Round, definitely, because I think I made a point of it in the podcast last week, but it was a similar story again today. So actually, yeah, it's probably a good point. Actually, probably worth mentioning, because we haven't got down in the notes, but the Hondas definitely seemed a bit more off this weekend, because we were surprised last weekend how close the Hondas were. Like, we had obviously Furasato battling at the front, and was Bertelli up there as well? There was Adrian Fernandez, wasn't it? It wasn't Bertelli. Bertelli was up there.
Bertelli was there at the
beginning of this race, wasn't he? I think, yeah. But yeah, we had those guys fighting quite high up the front, but this week we didn't really see any Hondas at all. It was a Pira Mobility Group battle at the front, so it does seem like maybe Qatar was the outlier. Does seem a bit strange, because you would think Portimao's got a lot of flowing corners. I mean, in Motogp, the Yamaha was working better than it was at Qatar, for example, so you would expect the corner speed bike maybe to be working a little bit better, but the Honda definitely seemed to be a bit off it this weekend.
Yeah, and again, you did mention there Qatar being the outlier. Kind of known that since kind of the last 10 years that you yeah, exactly. Yeah. I went 10 years, you went 20. But that is exactly what Qatar is. It's like a Mario Kart race. You can never really take any data from it. There's no form book when you go there. Everything goes out the window. It's just a kind of a fun race we have once a year. So
never forget our Antonelli and Toba victories and Baldassari.
Exactly, and Nagashima. We could keep going. We could keep going. Rossi looked like he's going to win the 2013 World Champion on the last couple of laps in Qatar. There's so much. Qatar just throws up some weird things. So, this is our first proper look at it, and the fact that KTM was more what we expected, and the Honda was further off. It's a bit more normal. It's what we expected, what we've been hearing from a lot of the sources inside the paddock. So I'd imagine this is what the season will be. I'd imagine Honda will probably slowly start taking time back out of the KTM, and there will become a point of the season where it'll look more like Qatar, but I think that'll be once they get that kind of last little bit of the Honda sorted out. At the moment, the KTM, it just looks like a much better bike to be on, and it just is the better package. And Honda in Moto3 and MotoGP and most places these days are just slightly behind the eight ball, which is unfortunate. But Honda's Honda, they will get it sorted when they put their mind to it, really.
So moving on to Moto 2 then, and the race, there's sort of controversy before the race even started technically, because we had one of the guys who's come in as a championship favourite, had a bit of a rough round 1, but looked like he was a bit more on the pace this weekend. Fermin Aldeguer, jump start penalty straight away. I mean, it was called immediately by Gavin Emmett on the TNT Sports commentary. He saw it immediately. I didn't actually catch it at first, but obviously it came up a couple of laps later that he got him on that penalty, or double on that penalty, should I say, for a jump start. Showed us the video. Pretty clear, isn't it? He's rolling before the start. Maybe it's another one of those rules I think could do with a bit of a tweak a little bit the way it is, but, as far as the law is, he was rolling before the race started, so he got a double on that penalty, and a bit of a silly mistake to make there as someone who is obviously a title contender and now knows he's on his way to MotoGP, as obviously been announced this week. So that kind of pressure is almost off him there as well. Maybe there's the pressure that he needs to win the Moto2 Championship to make sure he's going to be Moto2 champion, but he's not got the future distracting him. He should be here in the moment, and a bit of a rookie error for someone who isn't really a rookie anymore.
Yeah, I was like you, didn't see it at the time. I remember he called it, and I was like, Jesus, where's Aldeguer? I was like looking up again because they have the different livery this weekend. I was just like couldn't get my eyes around it at all. That I was just looking for. I was like scanning up and down the grid, couldn't see the bike at all. And then when they watched it back, and you actually see it, he stops, shakes his head, then goes again. So it was like aware that he had done it. So it was a bit unfortunate that he had made the mistake again. Rookie error, exactly like you say. Maybe the fact his future is, again, you say his future settlement, he shouldn't be distracted, but maybe he is in the mindset of, I have to win the title, I have to be perfect. And again, we'll take the two jump start out of it, the 2 long laps. He did an amazing race today, there's no question.
He'd
Again,
win it easily if he hadn't got the penalties.
yeah, that's my thinking as well. Yeah, we'll get to his team in a minute crashing, but I still think his teammate probably thought as well, I have to keep my guard up, because even though Aldeguer's gone back, he still could come back into it. But unfortunately for Aldeguer, it's just one of those things that happens. The starting lights in GP are between 2 and 5 seconds. They're random for each start, and I believe it was it Moto3 and MotoGP that they were like 2.1 seconds, because the light came on and they went off immediately, and even I was like, Jesus, that looked really quick. But it's one of those things where, just to keep it fair, they have the kind of a 3-second window where they can go out at any point. So it was just unfortunate for Aldeguer, really. Again, he recovered his race well. He could probably, obviously he's going to be disappointed after the race not to be able to go out and win it, and after having good chance this weekend. But deep down, he'll kind of like, look, made a mistake at start, perform well, and at the end of it, he'll kind of know himself that that's his season on kind of his season kicked off now, because obviously the questionable mistakes and the tire issues he was having in Qatar was quite worrying for him, and a few others obviously. But this weekend it seemed a bit more business as usual for some of the top guys. So I think after a couple of days it'll kind of settle down. He realised that I still showed that I'm probably favourite for the title, so it's unfortunate, but I think when we get to Valencia at the end of the year, we're not going to be talking about this jump start, really.
Yeah, I mean, all in all, very good race for him, because if you look at it, the guy that had basically out of the top guys, the only one that actually had a good race last time crashed out. So he still gained points back on the championship leader, his teammate. Lopez won Qatar, fell off today, so Aldeguer made points up on him. Canet didn't have a great race at Qatar either. He had tyre troubles, so yes, Canet obviously gained a few points back on him, but Canet also didn't score amazingly at Qatar, so he wasn't the issue as much as Lopez is. And actually interesting that there's 2 Bosco Seguros going for a championship. I'd never thought I'd see the day of that. And we actually, I do want to give a little shout out at the start of the race. We had a 1-2-3 briefly with the Bosco Seguros, which is I think we had that last weekend, or was it like 3 in the top 5 or something like that at one point last weekend? But this time we had 1-2-3. I can't imagine that's ever happened before. So kind of shows that
Bosco Seguro, definitely not. Maybe back in like the Suter days and all them other things, we might have had something a bit weird, but definitely not with a speed up, as they were formerly known.
Yeah, because it seems like they've really hit the ground running with these Pirellis. Probably helps the fact that maybe the Bosco Seguro is actually a better base bike. It doesn't need as dialing in maybe as much as the Kalex, but the Kalex has more data. I don't know. It does seem interesting. I mean, they've been making strides the last couple of years. It's been very clear, but they do seem in this Pirelli era to have really got off to a good start. Obviously, aside from the riders, obviously not doing the best job this weekend, I guess, with the jump start and the crash. And obviously Agora making a few mistakes with his Bosco Seguro as well. But it does seem like could be an interesting season for us in Moto2. But yeah, Aldeguer, I think generally can be still pretty happy with this one. I do have one thing actually to sort of say about it. I don't know whether you'll agree with me or not, but I feel like it kind of relates to Formula 1 a little bit in the previous race. I don't know if people probably won't like a comparison there, because there's always a bit touchy, but they had a couple of jump start controversies where there was people rolling in the box but they stopped before the lights went out and then went again, and that's not considered a penalty there. Whereas obviously we had that today with Aldeguer. He rolled and sort of managed to stop it a little bit, but then went again. But he didn't actually leave his box, so I don't know whether maybe there could be some leniencies with that. If you've gone and stayed in your box and then stopped before the lights have gone out and then gone again, you've not really gained anything from that, because it's just like pulling up further in your box than the warm-up lap, which you're allowed to do. So I feel like maybe instances like that, you could either forgive it or just maybe give a single long lap, because it's not like he gained anything from it, I guess. I mean, I feel like he definitely did stop before the lights went out. I don't know what you think about that. Obviously, it's one of those things where it's difficult to police, because it can't be like, well, if you go actually over your box, like if you go a millimetre further, you get a penalty. Well, a millimetre's not an advantage, is it? So I guess maybe it gets a bit messy, so it's easier to just have the blanket rule, but be interested to sort of get your thoughts on that one.
I like the way it is now, simply because the rider knows straight away they have a penalty.
True.
I like the fact that they know straight, and it's pretty obvious. Again, in fairness to Gavin, who called it immediately, he saw a move, and it was dumb long lap penalty. It is Grand Prix level racing. They should be kind of guessing with the lights. They should be perfectly ready to go. I think it's the double long lap penalty is a fitting penalty for jumping the start, essentially, and I think moving in your boxes, in my eyes, is still a jump. I know it was Lando Norris and Jeddah went and stopped and went again, didn't get a penalty.
And Perez, I think, as well.
Perez did as well, yeah, I'm not surprised. So yeah, I think that in any motorsport, if you move at all while the lights are on in your grid slot, should be a jump start, because you are moving before the race started. The issue I have with me is that it's quite easy for someone to go and you kind of instinctively react with your clutch. So I wouldn't like it to be stop and go again, and because you can get people then jump and you can trigger other things. So I think it's no movement at all is the way I like it. The rule at the moment is better. I don't like the way the Formula 1 are doing it, because that it's messy, because just question marks. Is it advantage, disadvantage? Should it be a penalty? For me, the way it is at the moment, I'm definitely in agreement with it. And I think today he does make a silly mistake leading the clutch out just too early. Again, he stops, I know, and he doesn't gain anything, but he still has made a mistake. So at Grand Prix level, I think that is a fair penalty.
Fair enough. I mean, I kind of agree with the point that, yes, was the rider knows straight away, and also, riders will probably try and take advantage of it, I guess, if they think they can get away with maybe not getting a penalty. So yeah, I suppose it is one of those tricky things. So maybe a blanket rule is for the best, but I just thought I'd kind of float the question, see what you thought to it. But interesting to get your feedback on that one. And of course, I did mention it earlier. I think you mentioned it in one of your earlier points as well. Obviously, Alonso Lopez, the current championship. Well, he's not the championship leader now, but going into the race, he was the current championship leader. Also, after winning in Qatar, he was leading initially. Well, actually, Aldeguer led initially. He put a very, very hard pass on Fermin Aldeguer, which is not something it's not too unexpected from Alonso Lopez. We can't expect that from him. We've seen it plenty of times in the past. We've seen collisions with him, especially with Sam Lowes at Mugello last year being probably the most absurd, and I think Dixon at India as well. There was a couple of silly incidents, also Catalonia with Acosta as well. So we have seen Lopez be pretty aggressive, but sat his teammate up quite aggressively, I think on a couple of occasions actually. And looked like after obviously Aldeguer was out of the running really with his double long lap, looked like he was pretty comfortable up front. Obviously had a bit of a gap of Aaron Canet, but of course Canet, we've been looking really fast all through pre-season, all of this weekend, all of last weekend. So it's by no means in the bag, but we're watching Aldeguer come through the pack at this point, and then we just cut to, in the gravel, Alonso Lopez, down he goes. It's kind of, I don't know if it's kind of rare to see him make a mistake. I don't think I've seen him crash out of a lead before. I've seen him control a race a few times for the front. I've never seen him really crash out of the race. So a little bit of a rare sort of mistake there for Lopez, especially considering how well he rode last weekend. We had nothing but praise for him, but almost a little bit more reminiscent of last year when he was in his sort of struggling phase. We saw a few more crashes from him, but obviously whenever you crash out of a lead, never great, especially when probably your biggest threat for the win has already sort of taken himself out of it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one. Again, I'm kind of at the moment giving everyone a bit of a clear slate of new tyres, bit of everything going on.
Kind.
I'm very kind, yeah, especially against him really, because I I've not minced my words in the past about him, but am I right in saying that he either crashed or ran through the gravel at Corrantoya at Mugello last year after taking Sam out?
Yeah, he ran into the gravel, because he went to do the long lap and he went in.
Oh, he balls it up.
ran
Yeah.
into the gravel.
Correct.
Because they were saying that a single long lap was ridiculous for like what he actually did, but then it's like, well, he kind of gave himself a penalty anyway.
Yeah,
so.
I knew I had some memory there. I wasn't sure if that he got to the lead and kind of blew it and then cost himself. And I knew somehow he basically cost himself as well as Sam. But back to today. He's now 5th in championship as well after today's result. It's unfortunate because you want to start the season by putting points on the board. Obviously, you've mentioned that with Aldeguer's Qatar, you would love to see him put another 25 points on, start building a championship. I guarantee if you're his team boss, everything around him would want him just to try and put numbers on the board. That's all you can do in the sport, to just keep putting double digits up each week and then see where you're at come the last kind of flyaway race and go from there, and then you can kind of work your magic if he wasn't under pressure. I didn't see anyone behind other than his teammate, which we probably knew that he was a threat, but at the same time, is he going to come all the way out from 2 long lap penalties past all them riders and have tired to beat his teammates? I would
Not
say
on the
no.
Pirellis. You could have done it on the Dunlops.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, with the Dunlops it would be an issue. Yeah, definitely. But we obviously saw he came back and finished. Was it P4? He finished as across the line.
He beat a goal.
So he was thereabouts, but it's like the Canet, Roberts, Gonzalez, Agora, none of them were stand out to the point where we're thinking Lopez could be in trouble. So it was a bit of a, again, I don't want to say it cost me a day, because I know for a fact that corner is very rippled, as well as you're coming up to it and it just levels out, so it's really easy to crash. We saw Binder do it in the sprint. So it is an awkward corner, and even when he made a couple of lunges on his teammate into that corner, the front was chattering like mad. So when I saw him crash, I was not expecting it or not surprised, or a small surprise, to be fair, because he is pretty decent when he has a bit of that Lorenzo about him, where he does get to the front and kind of seems to be able to do lap after lap and not be affected by it. So it was a bit of a surprise, but again, difficult track, Portimao, and again that corner is a particularly awful one. So reset, go again in Qatar or in Texas, and just hopefully, I don't want it to be that it's after swinging already back in Aldeguer's favour, because straight away in Qatar we're like, oh, this guy's meant to be going to GP and he's been beaten by his teammate, and then here he could have been again beaten by his teammate. There could have been a whole battle going on. But if Aldeguer now goes up, we'll say wins in Texas, and Lopez is like 6th, that kind of storyline battle could already be quenched, which would be a shame, because it would be lovely to see the two teammates who battled each other for a long time, both Spanish, and coming up against each other. It would be nice kind of see it, just like Rod Fernandez and Remy Gardner a couple of years back with the KTMs, or the KTM badge Calix. So I do hope that he can kind of press reset and come back strong, because it'll definitely be a better season with him up the front.
Yeah, I think it'd be really tasty to see a title fight between those two. They kind of, I guess, if you watched Junior GP or the Moto2 class a few years ago, you got a little taster of it. I remember watching 1 or 2 rounds of that, and it was those two just miles out ahead of everybody in every single race there. They really were dominant, and it was Aldeguer that had the advantage on those occasions. So maybe we'll see it play out in a similar way. But yeah, I think at Austin it could be interesting, because historically the speed has been very good there. So again, it could be another one of those rounds where going into it is a battle between those two, maybe Agora and Sergio Garcia, if they can sort of get up there. Sergio Garcia again kind of ghosted his way through the pack, I think, a little bit. So yeah, it does seem like that bike is working pretty well. But it would be really cool to see a proper scrap between those two, because we got a little glimpse of it today. But if he hadn't had the long lap penalty, I think it really could have been a proper tough battle between the two of them, and that would have been really fantastic to watch. So hopefully we do get that again, because honestly, the whole time they've been in Moto2, either one has been good and the other has been further down, or like vice versa. Like they've never both really been at the front together, which is kind of strange when you think about it, considering the amount of races in Moto2 they've actually probably won over the last season and a half or whatever, the last couple of seasons. There's probably quite a lot of them, in fairness. So yeah, it's been a bit unusual not to see them together on track, but hopefully we can get some battles, and hopefully they stay clean, because again, as we've said, there is a little bit of previous there. So yeah, we'll have to see how the rest of the season develops. But of course, with those two out of the picture, that left a bit of a group race at the front. Obviously, that was between a few different riders who we kind of expected to be good, actually. It was kind of strange. Like, over the pre-season, there were some riders that we thought were going to be really good and then kind of struggled at Qatar. But Joe Roberts, probably being one of the most notable ones with that, looked amazing over pre-season testing, then was kind of nowhere in Qatar, like, which was really weird because he's usually really good at Qatar. That's the strange thing. I mean, he got his first ever pole there. Did he get pole there again last year, actually? But I don't know if he did, but he was right at the front anyway, even if it wasn't quite pole position. And he ran in the lead for a while in that race. And yeah, it was very strange to see him a few months later at the same track after having such a good pre-season, struggling so much. But definitely a bit more of the Joe Roberts of old at the track another track where he's gone very well in the past, Portimao, his only ever victory. Now, there is a slight asterisk against that, of course, with the whole half of the grid being out and not allowed to restart. But also, he's had some other good races there, so a couple of podiums, I think, in the past that weren't strange races. So Joe Roberts obviously showing form at Portimao. It is a track that you would expect to suit his riding style, and it was great to see him back at the front because he's a really nice chap. I mean, they're all nice guys, but it's nice to sort of root behind him. He's had a tough couple of years really at Italtrans. I think it was definitely a mistake for him to move to that team. Obviously, it was the championship winning team at the time, but it wasn't an IO or a Mark VDS kind of team. It was this is a strange season in Bastion, and he did quite well, championship winning team, rather than we are the best team with the most money kind of thing, and there's the language and culture barrier. So I think him being back in an American environment with John Hopkins and seems to be working for him because obviously it was a little bit of a blip at Qatar, but Joe Roberts rode a very good race today. Could have even won it at some points if it had gone a little bit differently.
At midpoint, I was kind of tipping my hat at him because it was a kind of a group battle, like we said. There was about 5 minutes, and you're kind of looking. Canet never won one. Roberts has won one here, but again, it admires a major asterisk next to it.
Yeah.
Manuel Gonzalez hasn't won one. Oyogora's on a new bike, and that was that really. So you're thinking, all right, we have someone who's almost a champion in the class, Oyogora, on maybe not fully up to speed on the Bosco score yet. Manuel Gonzalez, who's making steps week by week, but you don't expect him to kind of get to the front and do what Aldeguer would have done, for example. Canet, you're just always thinking he's going to implode, and then Joe Roberts, someone that has a mistake in him as well. So I was kind of watching this race thinking this is a very interesting race, and I really can't choose. And if I had to pick, I would have put Roberts just because of his kind of previous on this track. But in fairness, between really all of the riders there, Manuel Gonzalez, Canet, Roberts, there was very good race management for all of them. Obviously, Canet ended up getting it, Roberts second, and Gonzalez running off the podium, but they all seemed to just manage the race pretty well. I think pretty much they all got the most out of their packages in, and again, they all finished within 2.5 seconds, which is for a Moto 2 podium in a dry race to be only 2.5 seconds apart is a sign of that. It was a real closely contested battle, so it's been a good race for him. And again, I'm kind of hoping for these three riders now. Obviously, Gonzalez, I don't really feel like he can kick on from here because I think he's already kind of kicking on. He's step by step, he's getting there. And again, with the podium this weekend, I expect him to kind of keep up these strong results. Joe Roberts is a bit of a yo-yo, gets a P2 here, might get a good result in Mugello, and then he could be nowhere for the season. So you're hoping really he can just replicate this a bit more consistently. And again, I think now that Aaron Canet has gotten the 14.5 stone monkey off his back with a race win, I think we actually could see him maybe challenge for the title. I think there's no question of his speed. I think there was just a massive mental block, similar to Maverick, we'll get to him in a minute, towards the big number one trying to get the victory. And I think we might see, similar to Anshu last year when he finally got that one, there might be a couple more in the post on his way. So again, this point kind of started out with Joe Roberts. I've covered everyone, but it was just one of those races where it's kind of happy that all the men that were at the front were there, because they all have kind of had tough times, and again, the three of them on the podium are well deserved. And again, Joe Roberts, I just hope he kicks on, really do, because I do also like him. And again, in that team and the whole kind of American racing, I do expect him to probably push in for a GP seat now with the Trackhouse team. So I'd like to see him build a bit of momentum and go up and not kind of get it just because of his passport, really.
Yeah, I think it would be kind of it'd be unexpected if he didn't end up on the Trackhouse bike at some point. I think, especially because Aprilia have shown interest in him previously, so it kind of really does go together quite well. So yeah, hopefully Joe Roberts can try and kick on. You may have mentioned obviously of Manu Gonzalez, obviously in that battle as well. Those two swapped places a couple of times, Joe Roberts and Manu Gonzalez. The front three were a bit more like a normal Moto2 race in terms of the fact the gaps between them were pretty constant for a lot of the race, but the gaps are just quite small. Rather than be like 2 or 3 seconds, it was like about a second, wasn't it, from Canet back to those two, and those two had fluctuated between about half a second and nothing between them, and they obviously did overtake a few times. But of course, we have got to talk about Canet really as the main guy. Obviously, it was a great race for Roberts and for Gonzalez, but Aaron Canet finally getting that win off his back, like you were saying, and it's been a long time coming. What was it? 2020 was his first season in Moto2, so been a long time. Obviously, he was on the speed up that year. I think he was on the speed up for 21 as well. Then obviously he's done a couple of seasons on the Pons Calex. Obviously that team no longer exists. Moved over to the Fantic Racing team, which obviously used to be the VR46 team. So, championship winning pedigree there. I mean, I'm sure some of the personnel are no longer there. I'm sure they're in the MotoGP team instead. But even still, it's got good foundations. Fantic, from, I'd never really heard of them before they came into Moto2, but I think they're fairly decent manufacturer, so they think they've got fairly deep pockets to put enough money into the team. So yeah, it's kind of all the teams you expect to do. Obviously, Vietti actually did get a win with them last year as well, so it's not like it's only the VR46 success that you remember. They are a race winning force. So again, Canet kind of joining up with that was always gonna be quick, but was he gonna be able to get that victory? And he finally did it today. And, this was one of those races that I think, he's crashed out of before. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those races where he's been leading. There's been no rider not that far behind him. He's not really stretching away from him. And then he tries to push a little bit more and he crashes, or he's trying to, calm himself down. He makes a mistake and runs wide, misses, false neutral or something like that. It just, we have seen Canet make these mistakes. I mean, remember, was it last year at Austin where he crashed out the lead? Or was it the year before, actually, wasn't it?
Year before.
Yeah, year before. Where, literally, very similar to this, I guess, really. He was running second, leader crashes, takes the lead, then a couple of laps later, he crashes as well. Now, Austin is Austin. Sometimes you will crash for basically no reason because you hit a ripple, but, again, Portimao, not, like we were saying, literally, Lopez crashed at a very easy to crash that corner. Turn 5, another one that's so easy to crash at. We've seen so many crashes there over the weekend. Turn 3 as well. Another little hairpin corner. It's easy to make a mistake, especially when you're under that much pressure. Again, they're not too familiar with these tyres. Canet made a mistake with the tyres last week, and to be honest, I did think potentially he could have been doing that again at the early part of the race when he was sort of fighting with some of the other riders in the battle, but seemed to manage it perfectly this time. And it is nice for him. It is really nice to see him finally get that victory. And I think, like you say, I think he could kick on with it. I'm still a little bit sceptical because, yes, there's a mental block to it, but he would have won one sooner, I think, if he really was going to fight for a championship, in my opinion, in this class. Obviously, he fought for the championship in Moto3, but again, it was a similar kind of thing. He'd have good results, but was never really a championship force, and then he was obviously a championship contender that one season, but I think, I don't know if it's a harsh thing to say, but I feel like the 2019 field in Moto2 was quite weak. Moto3, sorry, was quite weak compared to what we've had in some of the other seasons. See, like Dalla Porta win the championships, never really gone on to do a lot else. And some of the other riders they're battling with maybe were more rookie riders, or again, not particularly advanced their career much further. So I feel like, yes, he was a championship contender that season, but that was a kind of weaker field. So I'm still, a little bit sceptical about Canet. We've seen he's got the pace, clearly, but it's that consistency that he lacks, because we have seen him obviously finish second, 20 times, whatever it was, 15 times, I think it was, 15 second place finishes or something like that. And I think, was it 20 podiums and 15 second places or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, something like that, anyway. So clearly, yes, he's good at finishing sort of on the podium fairly regularly over 4 years. That's not a bad hit rate. That's basically 1 in 4 races, effectively, isn't it, on the podium? But we've also seen plenty of races where he's crashed not even out of the lead or battling the lead, out of 12th or something, or just kind of been a bit absent all weekend. And so it's not quite the kind of performance you have for a championship contender. I guess we'll have to see. I mean, I think he's definitely got some good pace, and if he can bring the good pace every weekend, which so far he is 2 for 2 for bringing the pace, even though, obviously I've said that he struggled at Qatar. I think he still finished like 5th. It wasn't that bad, but it was just compared to the expectation and obviously the mistake by dropping back and then using the tide to come back through. So, yeah, I'm still a little bit sceptical about Aaron, but I guess we'll see. And really good for him to finally get that monkey off his back. So on to Motogp then, and a very, very interesting weekend. Definitely some things we didn't expect to see during this weekend, so we will get straight into it. We'll start off with the sprint race. Just overall, the sprint race, not what we expected at all, because it was kind of inverse of what we normally get. Pecco Bagnaia was leading the sprint, really aggressive off the start, was sort of pulling away, had that gap, almost like what we see him do in the main races, but usually he struggles in the sprint. He's leading for quite a while. Then he makes a mistake, which is, I don't know, I go to say rare, but I don't think it is that rare. It's rare to see him make a mistake when he's leading in the way that he was there and not under pressure from the riders behind. So, yeah, I'll stick with rare. I think he did admit later on it was a bit of a greedy mistake over the bump, but what do you make of Pecco's sprint performance? Because up until the mistake, it was very, very good. I was surprised to see him so good in the sprint because it looked like it's going to be a normal Bagnaia weekend. Struggled a bit in practice, didn't qualify amazingly, but still, well enough. And it looked like he'd probably maybe look at the data after the sprint, maybe have a good Grand Prix, but it turned out really it was kind of the opposite.
Yeah, if I kind of go back to my Saturday evening mentality of what I was thinking of owing up to the situation, what I would say is that he's going to destroy everyone on the race, because obviously usually his qualifying is hit or miss, because for a while he was the best qualifier in the world, and Martin figured his form out, and Pecco just does enough these days. He's kind of thereabouts. Obviously, I was in complete awe of what he did in Qatar. I think I did say that he his. Yeah, I think he's completely stepped it up. And when I thought about Qatar, I thought he's after making another step this year, which I thought he had to. I think I mentioned that his first title came against an underpowered Yamaha. Second title came against a similar, equal equipment, but also a lesser team. And if he wants to win a third one against a more experienced Martin Marquez, name anyone else into that hat, Costa, for example, Costa. Or even maybe Vinales after this weekend.
Rossi I think coming out of retirement,
Yeah, Rossi on his R1 at Portugal coming out of retirement. So, you just think that maybe he's going to have to again go and find another step. And I don't think it's in terms of speed or even racecraft. I just think it's consistently and eradicating these mistakes. And again, look, he said himself, I fucked up, is what he said in his TNT interview, which is, again, I kind of appreciate his honesty. And
didn't try and blame the bike or anything.
Exactly, didn't say that it was, we have to look at the data and it was a weird technical issue and I don't really understand it. He admitted that it was completely a Pecco mistake, and I think if we went back 2 years, there would have been a bit more of smoke and daggers and clouds about that. Was something wrong with the tyre or whatever, but in fairness, he came straight out and said
last year, the bike's too good.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a weird one again. Where we go next week or 3 weeks time?
Yeah, so about Alex Rins putting him under pressure again. Yeah,
yeah, which I hope not. But after today's result in the main race, looking back at it, Pecco, I'm starting to scratch my head about him, because there's no question his talent, his work rate in the whole weekend of how he gets there to the we'll say the last laps of the main race, and how he works his weekend out like Davi used to, for example. I suppose Valentino in his younger years too kind of went through a kind of a program and come to the end of the race. He was there and that was all that matters, and that's back in the day. That's where the points are. Whereas I think Pecco had a very good hybrid system of, I'll look like I'm nowhere, I'll do okay in the sprint, and then I'll be the boy on Sunday. And I think that was enough for a while to win, and I got him his title obviously last year, but I don't think it's going to be enough this year. I think he's going to have to find more on Saturdays in terms of qualifying, and maybe I don't think risking more is the right strategy, because I think sometimes
look what happened today.
Exactly. I think he risks too much sometimes. Perfect example is today. I think he risks too much sometimes for no reason. So like Catalunya last year, I know it was a high side, but he's risking a lot in turn 2 of the opening lap. like if you, like we can look back at this now and just think like that was so unnecessary. He put him off. That was like 6 months of pain he put himself through just because he was trying to be in Aprilia Catalunya. He could like looking back at it now, he was always going to get the jump on them. He probably could have just played the Davi game of park it everywhere. The
He
Aprilia
could have
had the
just
best
finished
overall
third.
ranking.
I mean, that would have been better than nothing, and then having an injury for like the next 3 rounds.
Yeah, he does still make questionable decisions. Again, I've no question of his speed, his talent, his ability, his racecraft. It's just these mistakes. And again, today in the main race, we'll get to that in a bit probably. The sprint one, he does admit himself he was being a bit, I suppose naive isn't the right word, but he said the fuel was going down. He could feel the bike getting a bit lively in places, and he kind of kept pushing on. I think he was just probably trying to keep the speed. And again, look, one mistake is okay. It's a very difficult corner, difficult track. If he doesn't have the perfect
He
set,
did a good job to stay on, really, to be fair.
Very exactly. Yeah. Again, he didn't lose much, but then when he came back on, did well to beat Jack Miller. His pace was very, very worrying. So it's just again, in my Saturday mentality, I'll talk more about him in this after what he did on Sunday. But it's a slight little worry again because I can never trust him, and Saturday's mistake again was unnecessary. Don't think he needs to be risking that much at that point of the sprint. Like even if he gets caught and passed, like he could have crashed easily there. Like that could easily have gotten a lot worse. We saw obviously what happens if you go off at turn one onto the green paint. It seems to be very rippled. We saw what happened to Maverick. We saw, I think there's a Darren Binder in, I think it might have been Q1 yesterday where he ran on wide at turn one and like had a massive kind of like high side, stays on it, but like it just seems that there's massive serrations out on the green paint. So it's not a part of track you on, but to finish up on the kind of sprint mistake, it's just not necessary at the moment from him. He just needs to be more consistent, which is probably what he's always been told, but I thought he'd gotten rid of it, but here we are again.
Yeah, it seems to crop up, doesn't it, every so often? You kind of think he's got rid of it. Similar things happened at the start of last season, really. I mean, remember how good his first round at Portimao was? We're like, wow, no one's touching this guy this year. And then turn out he crashes out of trying to chase out a satellite Ducati like for no reason. And then the race after he crashes trying to beat a satellite Honda for no reason. Like, it's just like, why are you doing this? And then, you know, he seemed to get it sorted. And then, he's crashed at India for no reason kind of thing. It's, yeah, he goes through phases of it because it was the same the year before as well. He kept crashing all the time. And then, he was out of the championships. He started winning everything. And then you get to Motogp, he was trying some silly move on Quattararo for like no reason again. Like it's just poor decision making almost more than anything, rather than necessarily obviously the mistakes. But then I think a lot of the time it's a mistake because he's trying something he just can't do, and he's decided he's going to do it for some reason anyway. So yeah, I guess maybe we'll talk about it a bit more later. But I think it was notable that his pace seemed quite good in the sprint and then not so good in the main race. So again, I suppose we'll probably touch on that in a little bit when we talk more about the main race. But seems like maybe a different weekend approach was taken this time and seems to maybe have not worked out for him. Very strange, actually, because almost the opposite of his main championship rival. So another big talking point, really, of that sprint race was Marc Marquez really starting to... Well, I was going to say look comfortable, but actually it's almost the opposite. He looks quite uncomfortable this weekend on the Ducati, but that's almost more like what we're used to seeing Marc look like, with the bike sort of snapping, a few crashes here and there, which obviously we didn't get at Qatar. He had a very strange one in qualifying, which turned out to be him putting the ride-height device on too early, which, again, calls for ban those, because if you can make someone lock the front through last corner at Portimao, that's a pretty big accident, so maybe don't have that on the bike. He obviously had a crash at turn 5. In the sprint, he actually made a pretty big mistake at turn 5. I think he could have won the sprint if he hadn't done that, actually, because obviously Bagnaia would have still made the mistake, you would assume, and Marquez is the one picking up the pieces for that, but he's so close to crashing there to pick the bike up, run wide, but then did really well to actually recover it, send it up the inside of Martin into that last, not that last corner, but that corner on the last lap, should I say. And it was an aggressive pass, but pretty fair, to be fair. And Martin, I don't know what Martin said about it particularly, I haven't really seen, but he gave him the space. Marc got his first sprint medal on a Ducati, and kind of showed that he can beat the more up-to-date bikes. Obviously, last weekend he was obviously the top GP23 all weekend, but wasn't able to topple those two GP24s because he was able to beat Bastianini, of course, but he wasn't able to beat Martin and Bagnaia. Obviously not even worth mentioning Morbidelli because he was still obviously very injured and still seems to be finding his feet this weekend as well. But in the sprint race, he showed he can beat those top guys on the GP24, get in that podium. To be honest, obviously he beat both of them, didn't he? He beat Bagnaia and Martin, so it was a very, very good sprint race for Marc Marquez, and kind of a bit more of a glimmer of, not hope for him, because he looked good in Qatar, but he didn't really look like he could get a podium in Qatar, whereas he immediately goes to Portimao and gets on straight away.
Obviously, on Friday, he went very fast in FP1. Now, they were about 3 seconds off the lap record with I think Thursday night, we had rain in Portimao, and it brought this kind of like Saharan dust onto the track, and it was as dirty as you'd see Termas and Qatar. It was so unusual. I've never seen
Marquez conditions, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So when I saw him top FP1, I was kind of like, oh, maybe we're on for something here. And then I saw the lap times of FP2 and they were like 2.4, and I was like, okay, so the first session is completely irrelevant. That kind of means nothing that he topped it. Like it's kind of like topping a wet warm up. It's kind of like, oh well, it doesn't really mean anything. Like it's going to be totally different when we get to actually any racing. So Saturday, a lot more difficult really is the grand scheme of things really for me. He ends up having obviously he has the first crash, then he has to be fair, probably his best performance yet, which was the sprint. He looked lively in the sprint. I think at the moment in his current state with that bike, he could do it over the shorts. I don't think he can do it over a full race. We'll probably touch on him again later in the podcast in the full feature length race, but at the moment the sprint is where he's strong. Over one lap, he looks
good. Every bit as good as the others, doesn't he? Really,
he looks good, but he doesn't look like Marquez over one lap used to be box office.
Yeah,
he looks like he can probably comfortably be on the front two rows pretty much for the whole season. But I still don't look at him and go, he's going to put 3/10 into Jorge Martin's outright speed. I don't think he has that at the moment. Exactly. So I still think pole positions at the moment are going to be. I suppose he doesn't really need them, to be fair, does he really? But in the sprints, I think at the moment that's his best chance. Obviously, we saw the podium on Saturday. It's an interesting one because a lot of people saw the FE1 and saw them top that and we're getting way ahead of ourselves. And to be honest, BT Sports were bigging him up on Friday saying he had the best race pace, but the track was not in any good condition. I think that was a bit of a bit silly from them, because you're on about a track that's so dirty that the race was nothing like what we were seeing on Friday in terms of lap times.
They are also trying to get people to tune in, so maybe
100%.
There is a slight maybe exaggeration. Like Marquez might win this weekend, guys. Come and watch it.
They are playing the television game and the numbers game, but fair enough. You can probably take that for that, really. But I still don't think this was an amazing weekend for him. Obviously, what happens in the race is what happens. And again,
an amazing weekend would be a double win, wouldn't it? Really?
Exactly. Yeah, but to be fair,
which we'll get next week.
Yeah, jeez, next week. I'll mince my words next week when he takes pole from 0.9 over Jorge Martin and Pecco. But just overall, I don't know if I expected more or less from him, because has he ever done well at Portimao? Not ever since, because just when it came on
been once, hasn't he? That's the thing. They obviously went Portimao the first time was 21, 20. Sorry,
he was there for that.
He wasn't there. Yeah, but then he was there. Yeah, then he was there for 21, wasn't he? But that was it was his first race back, wasn't it? The first Portimao round, and
him, Rossi, and Alex Marquez were 10, 11, 12.
Yeah, and he beat Alex Marquez, and then was he out then again for the other Portimao round, with the eye? I feel like he might have been.
Yes,
because it's towards the end of the season, because he missed the last couple of rounds. Then was it 2022? What happened? I think he might have missed that as well.
I don't remember 22. Obviously, 23 is the crash one.
Yeah, 23 he was looking really good. He was on pole. But again, I think it was a case of he could kind of push. It was the first round of the season, wasn't it? I guess so. He was just over the limit. But I think he could. It was strange because he could still get something out of the Honda over one lap. I think occasionally, but because it was still his bike in a certain way. But yeah. So he came into the weekend saying he didn't like the track, but I don't think he's that bad. I think it kind of works for him because it's the hard braking. in a few spots on the front end, and we saw that with the Costa actually in the race, didn't we? How crucial that is.
Yeah.
So
Overall, for me, Marcus, this weekend, it's an okay weekend. I still think his long race pace is still a bit off.
yeah, it definitely seems to be.
He definitely doesn't seem to be... Like, if he wins in Texas in the main race, I think that will be a sign. I think even the Marcus Texas kind of multiplier might even be a bit too much. I think the sprint, he'll have a very, very good go. I think it'll all come down to see, the way GP is now, you're building from the first time you get on track. So if you don't start right, you're really putting yourself out for a sprint, for qualifying, for the main race. So he's going to need a good, clean weekend, and we haven't seen that yet because all the testing he's had issues in terms of mechanicals. Doesn't like Qatar. He's open with that first weekend on the bike. Qatar's always a weird one. We've mentioned that about 70 times already. Portimao, he's come here a track he doesn't like. Crashed 4 times. Once in warm up, once in qualifying, once in FP3, and obviously in the main race. So, in terms of if you look at the
I feel
Grand
like
Prix,
he'd not count the last one.
True.
Like
In terms of that wasn't his mistake.
That was contact, wasn't it? So even if it was his fault, it was contact.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not really like.
But in terms of that, he's been taken out. You can say so for 3 crashes and been taken out on the 4th. So overall, it's just a bit of a questionable weekend. A lot of people, I think, were getting too excited. In fact, he looked good, and I think it was a shame he did have the incident in qualifying. I would have liked to see what he actually could have done.
Yeah, I think that changes his weekend quite a bit because
definitely, yeah, 100%.
I think he starts higher up, he can play a different strategy, whereas he kind of had to fight his way through a little bit at the beginning, and it's so hard even for him to make passes on people now. So now on to the topic that I've been waiting to talk about for the whole podcast ever since it actually happened, and Dill can vouch for that one. Maverick Vinales finally breaking his win duck with Aprilia. First rider to win 3 different manufacturers. I don't care, it's a sprint race, it still counts. First rider in MotoGP era. Obviously, I'm not forgetting Eddie Lawson. He's, doing it on the 3 manufacturers back in the day. But even still, jokes aside with that, it was really good to see Maverick finally winning on the Aprilia. Yes, it was only a sprint race, but he kind of backed it up in the main race, really, didn't he? I know it wasn't a race win, but by showing that he could be there, especially when you look at where the other Aprilias were, they were nowhere, really. I mean, I know last weekend Aleix was good in the sprint and the others were nowhere, but in the main race, he was also nowhere with them. Whereas Vinales managed to do it over across the sprint and the main race this weekend, so really good to see, but a very good ride from him. I must say it was, and I know like you're going to have some things to say about it, but I feel like he was quite aggressive, which we don't see from Vinales very often. He was up for the fight. He lent on Marquez a couple of times. I think he lent on Martin. He was pulling some aggressive dives at the inside of people as well to get back up, because it wasn't like he did his normal qualified sort of near the front, managed to just get a good start for once, or some chaos happened and he managed to get his way through, and then he kind of just circulated and just couldn't overtake the guy in front of him. He did get beat up a little bit, fought his way back to second, like back at the inside of a couple of people, and lent on them to stop them overtaking him in the first place. And then he was running a good pace behind Bagnaia, but no one really had anything for him. Then he made the mistake, and over the last couple of seasons, this is where we've seen Vinales sort of drop back. We've seen him lead races, especially last year. We've seen it a couple of times where he was leading races and then got sort of caught at the end, even in the sprints. But in this situation, kept his nerve ahead of Martin. Obviously Marquez turned up for Martin, so he had kind of his own issues. But a really good ride from Vinales, but especially when he's been really, really ill this weekend, which always seems to happen for some reason. Whenever riders are ill, they seem to have better weekends. It's like, I always remember Dovi, Mugello 17, his first win for a million years. Since 2009, and he was throwing up all the night before, and then he goes and wins the next race as well. But it's just always seems to happen. I don't know why. Whenever they're ill, they always seem to do really well. I don't know whether it's that kind of, maybe it is they feel so sort of run down. They're just kind of in survival mode on the bike, and they don't overthink. Maybe could be something to do with that. There's definitely some correlation there because it happens quite regularly. But even still, especially when you think of the mental side for Vinales, if you take that away from him, he's a very quick rider. So yeah, finally he has vindicated himself with the Aprilia victory. Yes, it was only a sprint race, but even still, he's not managed to do that up until this point, and definitely seems to have took a bit of confidence from him. I mean, I suppose there's not a massive amount to say about his race, but it was really good to see him sort of up for the fight, being aggressive, and not cracking under the pressure.
Will he kick on from it though?
Well, that's he took the momentum into today, but
True.
we
True.
have seen him have good sprint races and rubbish main races and vice versa before. So it was, and even the bike itself, right? Like we have seen, like last weekend, for example, Aleix had a really good sprint and was really coming through at the end, and had a terrible main race. Like it was nowhere. So it was good to actually see the bike consistent. Now we will talk about the bike later, I imagine. Again, kind of
Consistent.
being consistent, I guess, with its normal form. But the bike was actually consistent over the race to the sprint, which was an unrare sight. Vinales just looked good all weekend. I mean, he qualified second. It's not easy to qualify up there when you've got all those Ducatis. To be fair, he really was doing an exceptional job because again, he was so far ahead of the other Aprilias, which is just not something we see. Usually, whenever Vinales is doing well, it's Vinales and Aleix doing well, but maybe Vinales just has a bit more over Aleix at that specific track. Whereas it's whenever Aleix is doing well, sort of Vinales is nowhere, Oliveira is nowhere, Fernandez is nowhere. Where it is rare to see it this way, where Vinales is the one out front and those guys are the ones struggling. So, I'm quietly, I want to believe in Vinales. You guys know that. If you've been listening to the podcast for a long time, you'll know I'm a pretty big Maverick Vinales fan. I'm not afraid to admit that on even though we're talking about him, obviously being talking positively about him, not going to be biased towards him. Obviously, there's so many weekends he should have won, he just hasn't. But I really hope he does sort of kick on from it, and it's the best weekend I've seen from him for a long time, definitely. Because even Catalunya last year, for example, he looked good, but he just got outplayed by his teammate. Whereas this is the first time really we've seen him really fighting, really going for it, actually getting a win, and being quite clear of the other guys on the same manufacturer. I mean, even back in his Yamaha days, it was rare to see him, miles ahead of Rossi. They're usually pretty close to each other, and obviously when Quartararo was his teammate, he never really beat Quartararo, so from a couple of times. So yeah, it is good to see and very sort of un-Maverick like, to be honest.
His Saturday was pretty much perfect. I was actually surprised he didn't get pole. He was I think the last one across the line, missed out on
Yeah, he
pole
was.
by point eight of a tenth, something absolutely minuscule. So straight away there, he's done a brilliant job to be even in the ballpark ahead of the riders that he's ahead of. So straight away he has the platform to have a good sprint. Then the start is very good. Usually it pretty goes backwards. He gets beaten up a small bit, and then a sprint. A sprint these days is a Moto3 race for 6 or 7 laps where pass or be passed. And with at least in Moto3, you can kind of make an overtake and get it done. In GP, you kind of go wide, you open the door, you give the rider you're passing an overtake opportunity back, they can fight back. So you end up costing yourself a lot of time. So you see with riders who don't get the best starts and they battle in the midfield, they do seem to lose a bit of time. I think, if I remember correctly, Acosta in the sprint was making a lot of overtakes, but it was kind of like one forward, one back, one forward, one back. There was no actual ground being made up. There was a lot of just kind of messing around in the midfield area. So the fact that he actually was there, he was also catching Bagnaia, which is he's well stated in the media saying that he was catching him, and maybe that's why Pecco has made the mistake. His Saturday was perfect. It's the best we've seen him. It's pretty much what I thought we could see in Le Mans last year when he had that start and looked aggressive, was kind of lunging at people. I'm wondering, is the new Aprilia maybe slightly better front end wise, that he can just trust it more? Because Silverstone couldn't overtake Pecco last year in Mandalika. Similar situation, just couldn't overtake.
That was a frustrating watch, wasn't it? You just watched Vinales couldn't overtake
Yeah.
Bagnaia, and Quartararo couldn't overtake either of them, but they were both just clearly so much faster.
It's frustrating to see both manufacturers, obviously, but in terms of back to kind of the Maverick situation, where he seems race pace very, very strong all the time. For about 18 months now, he's probably been the fastest Aprilia rider, but he just doesn't convert it enough really. If you kind of on paper look at Maverick versus Aleix, Maverick is a lot more complete. He has a lot more success in his career. I remember going back to 2019, and in my head the order of kind of the field was Mark and then Vinales in terms of talent. I just feel like, and I still kind of rate Vinales as one of the best on the grid, just doesn't seem to be able to show it consistently. some of the just his outright speed and his talent, I think, is really good. I just think he just lacks that mental bit. Doesn't seem to get on well at the start to the races. Gets beaten up, probably loses his head a bit, and that kind of just goes on and on from there. So I think that's his biggest issue. I don't think he'll ever fix that. It's rare you see a rider who's a little bit weak mentally ever sort it out and come back. You're either kind of a Pedro Acosta, or you're like Marquez, where you're coming through and you're just bulletproof. You have that winner's mentality, or you're a little bit fragile. And there is people who've won over the years who are a bit maybe not as bulletproof as the ones I've mentioned there, but they don't win as consistent as your Rossies, your Marquez, people that are just built differently. And Vinales has a great Saturday, has a very good Sunday up until the last lap. Judging from his interviews, he seems more happy with his Sunday performance because he did it for longer, and also was catching Martin when the bike went pop. So to kind of finish up on him, I really hope he can turn this into more consistent results. I love the Aprilia. I'd like to see him back at the front regularly battling for wins like today, and I just hope that he can kind of somehow build upon it. But I've said them words. I hope Vinales can build upon this and go on from here. I've said that since 2017, so I've kind of, I don't really believe it. Same with Pecco. Pecco needs to stop crashing and making mistakes, but like it's in his DNA. It's the same with Maverick, unfortunately, for me anyway.
Yeah, at least Pecco actually wins the championship. Maverick. We're celebrating Maverick taking about 3 years to win a race. So it's only a half distance one, but even still, he's usually better at the end of the races. So I suppose that's a positive that he was good enough over the first half of a race actually win one. So that's always good. But you mentioned this Sunday performance quite a bit that in that sort of point there. So we'll move on to the actual main race on the Sunday. So started off, a bit steady. Well, not super steady. It's a MotoGP race at the end of the day. It's always quite aggressive. But again, kind of a bit of a trend that we've now seen over both of the previous weekends. Pedro Acosta seems to learn quite a bit from his sprint races when he gets into his main race, because he was unbelievable coming through the pack. Once again, just like in Qatar, I was convinced that he was going to run out of tyre. I thought he was going to run out of tyre. Just the way he was coming through, past everybody. He started off, he passed Miller. Then he was trying to pass Brad Binder. Oh no, actually, he passed Binder first, right? Yeah. Then he was trying to pass Miller, kind of messed that up and got re-overtaken by Binder. Then Binder passed Miller. Then he passed Miller. Then he was stuck behind Binder for a while, which is crazy to say. Binder has been the KTM golden child, and this new rookie is stuck behind him on the same bike. Passes him, rolls up to the back of Marquez, passes him, then stuck behind Bagnaia for quite a while. Don't know how he made that save to turn one. That was ridiculous. When he dived up the inside, the rear was snapping on the way in, then it snapped again, and he sat up on the curb and trying to pass him there. Then he ran wide, I think, once, trying to sort of close up to him. Then he finally did the dive into turn 3 and sort of covered off the line with Bagnaia trying to go around the outside. They almost touched, and it was just a phenomenal race for Pedro Acosta, and then ending up on the podium just to top it off. Obviously, he got quite lucky with the Vinales thing, but even still, to running 4th place in like his second full MotoGP race was nothing short of phenomenal. And it wasn't like, oh, everyone crashed, because there was only really the 2 crashes and they were behind him, and the other riders on the same bike just couldn't touch him. He had them sort of in his pocket.
For me, Binder was slightly off this weekend because Miller seems to go well at Portimao. It's kind of widely known that this is one of his better tracks.
Yeah, he's always been pretty good there. Even
he does seem to go well here. So for me, Binder's the worry of the KTM paddock at the moment, because he had pace, crashed in qualifying, a weird crash, crashed in the sprint. Brought it home for a decent P4 on paper today, but it was a bit worrying that he was a bit off it. Acosta was so good. Again, gets a start, passes Miller, goes behind Binder, and the whole KTM thing that you just kind of broke down. When he gets to Marquez, doesn't take long to do it, kind of squeezes Marquez into turn 1. Marquez tries to cut back, just doesn't have anything for him. He completely jumps from Marquez onto Pecco. Pecco is widely regarded as the kind of the Schwantz or the Alex Barros of the current field, that you don't really outbreak them without running off the track. Davi's a bit different for me, because Davi was a late breaker, but he was a bit more. He had more than just braking, I think. Yeah, well,
He parks it in the corner more. Bagnaia takes more actual speed through the turn then afterwards. So you can't just square him off.
Yeah, so when he went for the overtake and went slightly wide, I was like, well, that's to be expected. And then he basically found a corner that you're not as heavy on the anchors as you're normally, like coming into turn 3, you're coming in a bit lean, you're a bit sideways coming in, so it's a bit different. You're not kind of up and down back to gearbox and using all of what Pecco's really good at, which is really heavy straight line braking. So Acosta can use his head thinking, well, I'm not going to get him into 5. I'm probably not going to get him out of any of the corners through the twisty bit, so I'll have to kind of pretty much get a pry bar and try and slap a move into turn 3, which he did. As well as the best part of that move is not the actual overtake. It's when he goes wide, then cuts back and basically takes the line from Pecco, which is really, really clever racecraft, because it's so easy to go for that move, go slightly wide, then get cut back. I'm like, well, I've just basically shown my hand there and haven't gotten anything for it. And then just absolutely drops them.
Yeah,
and then the whole situation then of Marquez kind of seems to get brought along by Pecco onto the back of Pecco, or gets brought along with Acosta onto the Pecco. But when the two of them start to get close, Acosta just disappears. And in fairness, he's obviously fortunate for the podium that the Aprilia breaks down. But a P4 to a P3, it doesn't really matter. The performance itself is what it's more astonishing more than the result. But yeah, the podium second race, he's definitely a bit special.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was one of those things where, oh yeah, he'll definitely get some podiums throughout the year. He might win a race or something, and he's already got a podium in this second race. So, yeah, which is it's just something you don't see anymore. It's the kind of thing Marquez did, but even when Marquez did it, it was hard because of the riders he was against, but also easier in the fact that only 4 bikes basically could get on the podium every week, so he only had to beat one of them. So, whereas, MotoGP now, anyone can get on the podium. I mean, we've seen people that won races last year battling for like P16 today. Like, you know what I mean? It's on the same bike as well, not like they've swapped manufacturers. So it really is such a close thing in MotoGP these days. So it's so difficult to get on the podium so early on in the rookie season. And like I said, it wasn't a fluke race. It wasn't loads of crashes or anything like that. It was genuinely on pace, aside from like the one retirement in front of him, which I guess we should touch on now, is Vinales. Obviously, we've kind of alluded to that a couple of times. And sort of coming on to literally onto the last lap, he just seems to slow on the straight completely, gets blasted by Enea Bastianini, who, by the way, had a really good weekend, worth noting. Obviously, he was on pole position, rode a decent sprint race, had a very good Grand Prix. Nice confidence build of him. Actually puts him ahead of Bagnaia in the championship. Kind of unrelated, but I just thought I'd mention it. But Bastianini blasts past him. Then it's clear at that point, obviously, Vinales has some massive problem because the Ducati's not that much more powerful than the Aprilia that you can gain from like half a second back and just blast you before you even get to the line. Vinales sort of puts his hand up or whatever, clearly trying to sort out whatever issue it is, runs off the circuit, and then it kind of looked like the bike sort of then locked up on him and threw him off. But I think you know a little bit more about the issue that you've read online, so you know that's not the case, so I'll pass it over to you. But such a shame, really, for Vinales, because again, was looking for another podium after winning that sprint. Going to be a second place as well. Don't think he was obviously going to beat Martin because there was only a lap to go and he wasn't close enough, but even still was looking so good. And Aprilia, once again, breaking down. Whenever a bike breaks down, it's always an Aprilia. No other bike ever breaks down. It's really embarrassing. Like, it is, whenever you see a bike pulling into the pit lane retiring, it's, that's not crashed already. Half the time, we saw Alex Marquez, for example, today, obviously pulling the pits, but he'd already crashed on his bike. It was his own fault. Whereas you see the Aprilia, they're pulling because the starter isn't working or whatever, or the electronics aren't working, the bike is cooking them alive, the gearbox is packed up, the ride-out device is broken, It always seems to be their quality control just isn't great on the Aprilia.
To be fair, Aprilia are known as a bit of if you go to their road bikes anyway, they're kind of known for making the most beautiful and amazing bikes, but reliability has never been a strong point, so it's kind of funny that we're now at the top end of Grand Prix racing. And they have, in my opinion, the best looking bike. Probably sounds the best, and it's still unreliable. So at least they're keeping traditions going. The Italians like a bit of traditional.
Yeah.
Back
it goes
to
good till it goes pop. It's all right.
Yeah, exactly. Once it looks good, once it happens, gets them on screen, I suppose. But back to the Vinales incident. As he comes out of the last corner, goes up the start finish straight, sticks out his leg basically to alert Bastianini, and Acosta basically has an issue. From the statements I read of Maverick, it's some technical glitch that doesn't let the bike go into gear. You can see him kind of coasting now, and he's kind of constantly trying to go in and out of gear. As he rolls off track, he goes into second gear, and what he does is he opens the throttle, and the bike jumps into gear, and that's what gives him that snap. As well as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, that there's a lot of serrations out there. We saw Darren Binder, that is, have a moment out there and almost a crash. It's basically a very worn tire that's at the end of a race. A bike that's into second gear, you need to understand the torque these things have. It just basically snaps and flicks them over. Very unfortunate. I'll give a small explanation of the understanding of how it happened, but again, don't want to go too technical this hour tonight. But input output shaft speeds basically need to match for you to change gears. So when you put in the clutch, you're basically neutralizing two of them so that they basically can mesh and you can change gear. When you open the throttle, you're basically changing the speed of one of the shafts to match the other one. If you think of rev matching, if anyone knows what that is, you're basically neutralizing the two shafts so that you can jump between gears without using a clutch. Essentially, what I believe has happened is whatever technical issue they have that wouldn't allow the bike to go into gear, when he's opened the throttle, he's gotten to a point where basically he's matched the input and output speed of both shafts in the box, and it's jumped into gear, and then it's jumped into gear and bolted them. That's what's throwing him off. So that's just from my understanding from what I can see from basically the way it's happened, as well as the fact he says that he had the throttle open when it jumped into gear, so that kind of adds up that the input and output shafts just starting to align at the wrong time and happened to jump into gear. It's unfortunate because obviously he's been sick all weekend. He's had an amazing weekend up to this point. He really deserved a podium. He probably didn't have anything throughout the race for Martin. I think Martin did a perfect Pecco job of managing the race, where you take a tent off and you take a tent back. I think the top three really were so close, and again, they did so well to keep that speed going. But it was just a shame really for Maverick, because he really deserved it. And like, if he got a podium there again, no score for Pecco, no score for Binder in the sprint, he would have been pretty well in the championship race. So it's a bit unfortunate. I'm going to just scroll down.
He wasn't not the top three, because when it shows the updated live standings. Yeah, he was up there. I think. I'm sure he was.
He's 8 currently with 25 points. We're going to add 20 to that, and he will be second. He'd be ahead of Bastianini. He's he'd actually be third. Sorry, he'd be behind Brad still.
Yeah, but you also have to remember that they would have less points because he'd be in front of them.
Yeah, I correct myself. I was trying to do the maths on the fly. He'd actually be 3 points, 7 points clear of Brad. So he'd actually be second in the championship to Jorge Martin, which would be an amazing start to the season. So it's just unfortunate really for him. And again, we did touch on the Aprilia reliability, and yeah, it's a big issue. You're never going to win a title on a bike that keeps breaking down. As Valentino 2006, if it happens, you can't win on a bike that's going to break down. It's as simple as that.
You can if Elias doesn't take you out, to be fair.
Yeah. Yeah. Poor Elias.
I had to get that one.
Yeah, I was going to blame for 06 when really it was Yamaha's issues that cost him.
He gets to blame for 06, but for the wrong thing. That's the problem. People are he dragged him to lines. Yeah, he also sent him to the Shadow Realm at the first round of the season. That's like 25 points gone. The 5 points
in the mid 2000s. That's a 25 points if I've seen one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't, it was going to be probably more than the 5 points he lost the championship by. He was going to finish in the top 10. So, yeah, it's.
But for Aprilia, it's worrying. There are definitely some issues there, and again, maybe Aprilia at this point are pushing the envelope a bit too far to the point where they're trying things, and it's just a bit pushing their limits too far, maybe. But at the same time, is it worth it having a bike that could potentially win races if 1 in 3 races it doesn't finish because some sort of electrical issue, or in this instance can't go to gear, or whatever reason? Again, we go back to the end of 21 where it was Motogp where we couldn't get it into the right mode, and it's just silly little things like that cost you big in a world championship really.
I think the mechanic just put it in the wrong mode though in that situation, didn't they? Wasn't that the problem?
I don't remember exactly. I just remember that it was in one mode.
Just ran and shut the bike down and jumped on the one that had like softs on it, and that was unfortunate for him. But yeah, it always seems to be the Aprilia, isn't it, that's breaking down, and I think it's especially like usually right. You have a mechanical, or you just put in the pits, it's fine. But like on this situation, it's actually threw the rider off the bike because of the mechanical. And that's where you pick up an injury. So it's not just the points you've lost there. It's a potential that Maverick, fortunately, seems to be absolutely fine from it. But if he landed funny and hurt, that's a collarbone on high side pretty easily, we've seen, like, obviously it was a relatively low speed high side, I suppose, but we've seen plenty of times of the year people do collarbones. Obviously, we saw in
Mikel
Qatar.
Oliveira,
Yep.
his
Prime
KTM
example.
one in Austria.
Yep.
That messed him
Yeah,
up for 18
yeah. Actually,
months.
that was a good point. That was a very similar thing. Mechanical issue, very low speed. It shuts him off. Obviously, we saw, just how nasty a high side could be. Like Jake Dixon, obviously, that wasn't a mechanical problem, but high side he had at Qatar, for example, that's put him out for at least 2 rounds. So, it can easily be done. So it becomes a safety issue at that point. I mean, no, pretty much any mechanical is a safety issue, and of course, it's a sport all about machines. You're going to have mechanical issues. It's just going to happen. It's like the same. You're going to have tire issues, and the riders are going to make mistakes, but shouldn't be happening this frequently because it's dangerous, and it just kind of looks a bit silly. Makes a bit of a joke almost of the whole thing because you don't know if the Aprilia is going to actually make it to the end of the race or if it's going to cook the rider alive or chuck him off or
In fairness to Maverick, he did say that he was very lucky that it happened on the pit straight because he said Portimao is notoriously dangerous. So
yeah, well, I mean, even crashing on the
pit.
pit straight, it's dangerous. I mean, look what happened to Carlos
Yeah.
Tatai.
Yeah,
I thought that when we were on about the Bagnaia incident earlier, the mistake, it could be a nasty crash at turn 1. Yeah, it could be a really nasty crash at turn 1 down there because there's not a lot of. Portimao is such a good track, but the gravel's not great, and there is this tarmac runoff straight into basically a wall down there. I don't know whether it's been changed now since that incident. Potentially it has been. It's not a part of the track you'll ever see because they don't have the camera facing that way, so you wouldn't know. But you would hope that it's been changed. I mean, I think his bike hit him, right? So I suppose there's not a lot you can do about that any track, but even
true. But his bike hit him after hitting a wall, so that's still the wall. That's part of it.
And I guess similar to what happened to Pole, not the same turn, obviously, but fortunately, it does seem like this weekend there wasn't really anything like that. But I don't know if that's more there just wasn't any crashes that were that bad than Portimao fixed the issues. I think it's more of the former than the latter. But it's always good to get away the weekend without really anything too serious happening. But I do want to just give a little shout out to Martin because we want to mention him a little bit there. One about sort of obviously Vinales trying to close him up. Obviously, new championship leader. For the first time, he's going to lead it for more than 24 hours because obviously the last 2 times he's led the championship, he's won a sprint race and then immediately lost the championship lead. Do you have the championship lead to hand? It's fairly healthy, isn't it? After 2 rounds, it's
healthy it's 18 points. It's healthy.
Yeah, that's pretty good after 2 rounds. That's very good actually. So that's nice.
It's 20. It's 23 to Pecco.
Yeah,
which is like
so maybe
no
that's the gap to look
Binder.
at, right? Yeah. It's,
1 and 2 in the world last year. You kind of if Rossi started the 2010 season bad, you wouldn't say, "Oh, Lorenzo's 6 points on Davi." You'd be comparing Rossi and Lorenzo. So
Hey, look, Davi brought some great points back on the Lorenzo. Dono. Oh no, that was the year before, wasn't it? Yeah. So, yeah. Oh dear.
But yeah, so you're comparing. I know Binder's looking good this year, but I still think over a full season he's not going to be able to do what Martin and Pecco are going to do. I think this weekend is just a bit of a off one again. It just adds a question mark to whether maybe they're gone from being 40% at the races last year to maybe 60% this year, but I still don't know if they're going to be able to do it for a full season. So, that's why I
maybe you should look at the gap to Acosta. Maybe that's the one they're able to look at.
Yeah,
at the rate he's going
Costa, Geez, not much more. It's 32 points.
Yeah, there you go. So we've seen 90 something be reversed before, and that was a pre-sprint race era. So it's definitely doable. Although I don't think the Ducati's going to turn into a 2022 Yamaha and not being able to basically score any points. But yeah, just give a bit of a shout out to him. And the way it's kind of taken his weekend was a bit different. He qualified well still, which obviously has always been a strength of his. Wasn't as good in the sprint, but still did pretty well. Like he still managed to still get a sprint podium, which is very good. Obviously, it was weird to not see him winning it, but P3 is still good, especially since the points gaps are not big, so you don't lose as many points. And then in the main race, he looks unstoppable, which is kind of the opposite to the other way. Usually it's a first and then a third or a fourth the other way around. So maybe a different approach to the weekend, kind of the opposite almost to what Bagnaia has done. Bagnaia, I think, has maybe tried to improve himself in the sprints, whereas Martin's like, well, you obviously score more points in the main race, so we'll try and focus on that area. Not too sure if that's really what he's done, but definitely seemed like that. I don't know if you kind of feel the same way about it. But a very well done weekend by Martin, and that's actually quite a big championship lead to have after this point.
Yeah, it's uncharted territory now for him because he's not going to have the experience of leading. Obviously, last year he was constantly in the battle, but showing up every week saying in your head kind of like, I've nothing to lose, I'm not leading, I don't have a lead to protect, I'm chasing, you can kind of risk a bit more. Whereas now he is in motocross, if you lead a championship you have the number one plate. He has the number one plate at the moment, so he's going to be the guy that everyone's looking to be beating. I know Pecco is your current world title
And he
holder,
literally has the number one plate.
and exactly, he physically has it, so but it's going to be an interesting 6 to 10 weeks in GP just to see how this all develops, because we have the Mark Marquez, that is, that kind of scenario. How will Pecco bounce back from this? His first collision with his first coming together on Marquez. We knew Marquez on a Ducati was going to ruffle feathers with Martin, and Jorge or Pecco. So we knew straight away there was going to be.
I hate it when Martin hits into Jorge, man.
Yeah. But we knew that putting Mark on a Ducati was going to ruffle feathers of the other boys. So it was going to be it's stored down through the season. But now we have also two mistakes early from Pecco. I'm going to throw back in a second and ask you who you think was fault for that, because I haven't asked you that yet. But I'll give you a couple of seconds notice why I ramble on.
I already know. It's pretty clear cut.
Well, hang on, don't spoil it for the rest of us. But yeah, it's again, like it's the next 6 to 10 weeks up until maybe the summer break. There's going to be a lot of unanswered questions answered for us of who's what and where, because again, so much has happened over the last 2 weeks, and we're still only 2 races in, and we still have so much. We've learned so much, but we still don't know so much. So there's a lot to it. But we might as well finish on the incident: the world champion versus the 8-time world champion. How was Mark Marquez at fault? Is what I'm going to ask.
Well, he was at fault for existing. What he should have done was actually got out of the way of Bagnaia. Yeah, it was obviously the most contentious point of the race happened right near the end. Obviously, a very similar pass really to what Marquez did to Martin in the sprint up the inside. However, it was a bit more, well, probably just because Bagnaia is better on the brakes, he had to go further with it. So he actually ran wide and allowed Bagnaia to get the cutback. The problem is, Bagnaia forgot that when you get the cutback, you don't ride into the guy, you ride underneath him. And if you're going to ride into them, you have to shut the throttle and you've admitted that you've lost the position. But small misjudgment, but just completely rode into the side of Marquez. I mean, I remember seeing it happen, like, oh, it's crazy, and then obviously they both just like sort of slid out. Because I thought initially, like, was you see sort of Marquez start to go down, I thought it was just him going to go down on his own, but obviously the Bagnaia crashed as well because they had quite a high lead angle. So, because usually you'd actually come off best in the position that Bagnaia was, but because he had quite a high lead angle as well, like, you know, we've seen riders lean on the outside of each other. Now that's not what happened in this situation, obviously, but you know, we've seen it. If you're the guy with the more lead angle, you usually go down, but if they both have a high amount, they can both crash. Just a silly error, really. It's very, very reminiscent of the incident with Vinales in Le Mans last year. Kind of, again, Bagnaia just being needlessly aggressive with another rider and hitting into them and crashing. I understand it to an extent because he's just been passed by Acosta in quite an aggressive manner, because as much as we said, oh, it was a lovely racecraft to see Acosta take Bagnaia's line, it's quite aggressive, borderline of it, you know, on the limit. So he's probably a bit riled up by that. He's just had a rookie come past him as well. And then Marc Marquez comes past him on the bike he won the championship on last year. And Marc Marquez is a guy that he's probably going to see as a threat, right? I mean, you'd be pretty silly not to think that there's going to be races where Marquez is just untouchable compared to Bagnaia. He knows that. So he needs to try and build the points on him now when he can. And it's a psychological thing as well. I think that there's more at stake between those two than there was for a 5th place, because obviously Bagnaia has not been beaten by Marquez on the Ducati yet, up until, he had in the sprint, but it was more of a case of Bagnaia messed up and ran really wide. He didn't actually get passed by Marquez and beat in a full-length race, so I think he wanted to go back underneath him, but he just misjudged it, and he just completely ran to the side of him. Because people online have started to say it's Marquez's fault. Marquez does not turn in on Bagnaia at all. he runs wide because he's going for the pass, but then holds the same line. He doesn't cut back to the inside or anything like that. He holds the same line because they're miles away from the apex. They're both really wide. They're both really wide. So Bagnaia has plenty of room to squirt on the inside if he did it properly, but Mark's block pass was enough to run him wide a little bit as well, and maybe he got a bit hot. I mean, it is one of those corners you do miss the apex on a little bit, but there's plenty of track on the inside he could have used, and he didn't. He hit the side of Mark, and down he went, and down they both went, and it is a trait we've seen with Bagnaia before. He doesn't know when to sometimes maybe to concede. Obviously, in this instance, it is a psychological game. It's against a rival, but sort of jumping back to that Le Mans race as well last year, and the sprint as well. Marquez was kind of mixing it up there on the Honda in that Le Mans race, but I also felt at that time that Bagnaia was being quite needlessly aggressive with Marquez, and obviously having aggressive battling is great. We love it, and I'm obviously not saying you shouldn't battle people, but when you're the World Championship leader, the World Champion, you're battling with some guy that, let's be honest, is known for a reckless pass or two on a bike that's a bit twitchy all over the place, obviously last year with the Honda, and not a threat for the championship. Why be so aggressive on him? I thought that at the time, he was really leaning on him and things like that, and he got away with it on that occasion. And I think this time, he probably thought the same, that he was aggressive with Mark before and got away with it. This time, he messed up. And it is interesting with Bagnaia because he's had a couple of aggressive rivals now. Martin, for example, aggressive. And whenever the incidents have happened between Pecco and the aggressive rider, it's actually Pecco that's usually the one at fault and the one that's gone over the line, because I think naturally he's not that aggressive. So when he forces himself to do it, he doesn't do it. He's not comfortable doing it. He's not quite right doing it, and I feel like he steps over that line and makes a bit of a mistake because there was contact with Martin last year, right? If I'm not mistaken, I don't know if he knocked him off, but I think there was a time when he kind of nerfed a bit wide. Obviously, he knocked him off previously at Qatar the year before. Obviously, like I said, the incident with Vinales. Sometimes I just feel like he kind of gets it a bit wrong with his aggression, whereas obviously everybody gets it wrong. Obviously, we've seen Martin take people out before. We've definitely seen Marquez take people out. As you know, let's not sit there and say he's never done that. But more often than not, because they're aggressive, they get it right. But percentage-wise, put it that way, there's more amazing aggressive Marc Marquez passes that were lovely and clean in the end. Relatively so, without knocking the other guy off, compared to the ones where he's clattered somebody out. Whereas I feel like with Bagnaia, when it comes to his actual aggressive passes, more often than most people on percentage, it ends with contact, and usually him going down. He doesn't usually come off well from them, so yeah. Bit strange to see no further action, in my opinion. I mean, I know it was a bit of a race incident, but I feel like maybe a long lap or something is in order. Again, I could also see if you consider it race incident to not give a penalty, and I guess I don't want to mess with the championship, but again, that shouldn't really come into it. I feel like Bagnaia has rode into the side of the rider and got away with it effectively. Yes, he's fallen off himself, so I guess he kind of got penalised, but, he's still... if that was the last race of the championship, for example, or something, or, it's for the important points, it's well, I'm not going to beat him, so I'll just knock us both off. I'm not saying he did that, obviously, but I'm saying that if you applied the same if you changed the scenario slightly, the incident is still the same, so it should be looked at in the same way. So, yeah, it's... I've probably rambled on enough about this, but it's the contentious point in the podcast, so I've got to talk about it, and I'm going to pass it over to you. I'm assuming we're probably going to agree with who was at fault, but maybe not. Maybe, whatever. Who do you think was at fault, and maybe why, and a bit of an explanation?
Alex Marquez.
Ah, yes. To be fair, he did crash at turn 5, so, I mean, yeah, clearly it was his debris caused the incident down the ground.
Exactly. The racing incident, 70-40 Pecco. Not much Mark can do.
That doesn't really add up, does it?
What did I say? 70-40? I meant to say 70-30.
That is what you said.
Yeah. It's getting late. You've rambled on for far too long. I should be in bed. 70-30 Pecco. Marcus has gone deep. Pecco is the reason I'm saying it's not on Pecco fully is that if you go to the point where Marcus passed him and Pecco goes to cut back, if you look at his head position, he can't see where Marcus is. Can he take a third line? Yes. He's also trying to run Marcus out of the road. He does a bit of that going on. He gets it wrong. That's why it's 70% on Pecco. The 30% is just that Marcus gone for is it lunge? I think the one on Martin is actually worse. I think that's much more of an egregious move. Also, fun fact: he had the same pass with Martin on Saturday. Didn't have contact. Martin and Marcus had the exact same kind of little scenario that Pecco and Vinales had at Le Mans, and they didn't crash. So clearly, the two of them can get on well together, other than Valencia last year. But it seems when.
Not that last year, but Silverstone was 21 when Marquez just absolutely collapsed into him.
Yeah, that was a strange one. But,
that was bad. That was awful.
Forgot about that actually. Now that you mentioned it, but so far in the last, we'll say in the last year, also as well, this track last year they did Clyde as well. I'm actually, my point is turning very, very sour.
Yeah, quickly. But he wasn't actually trying to go for a pass then. He just completely messed up and just wiped everybody out. That was the Nakagami
forget all the other
crash.
ones.
Yeah,
exactly.
We'll forget the ones that make us look like we're not correct. So there we go.
Exactly. It's late. We've had a long day of
the point still stands though, right? It's like
it's still 70-40. Yeah. It still doesn't add up. It's still more on Pecco. It's still a bit needless from Pecco because on my eyes he can still take a tighter line. I know he's fully leaned off and he's maybe doesn't want to try and cut it too far in case he crashes himself. I still think that he's leaving too much on the table, that he's maybe in his head that he's, again, it happens. How many seconds it happened? Maybe a second and a half we're on about him. We're analysing for nearly 15 minutes. You need to cut these guys slack.
Just pick the bike up. Just pick the bike up more. He'd have stayed on.
Yeah, exactly. Sepang,
you should have asked what would Rossi do.
Yeah, exactly. Proper pick it up. Get the look over the shoulder going and all. He definitely would have came out on top. Mightn't have won any popularity contest by the end of it, but he would have stayed on track. But yeah, to kind of bring it back to the seriousness, I think it's just his head position is just what is the only thing that is taking off being 100% his fault. Marcus is cutting back quite aggressively. I don't think Marcus turns into him. Maybe Marcus could do slightly better, knowing that he's gone. Marcus knows he's going a bit deep. He's trying to pass Pecco. He probably knows Pecco's going to go for it. He could probably maybe.
He's trying to block it off, I guess, isn't he? He's trying to turn tight enough to stop Vanyard jetting up the inside, but he still went for it anyway, like anybody would have done.
Yeah, you've an unmovable force and a unnatural power. Something has to give between them, and that is what's happened here. Because if that's Vinales, who goes to that overtake and goes slightly wide, Pecco doesn't have any worry that Vinales is going to try and, we'll say, aggressively try and keep the position. Whereas obviously Merck is a different kettle of fish. He's going to risk more and take more risks.
Vinales isn't going for that overtake, is he? So
true, exactly. Yeah, that is the issue with Vinales. We're on about Vinales from this weekend that we're going to see from now on, and he's going to be crazy overtakes.
Vinales with his mask on.
Yeah, exactly. Doctor from the 1700s, Vinales.
Yeah,
with his his mask. So, 70-40. I'm going to keep it 110%.
There you go. That's the amount of effort that the Surds put in. There you go, 110%.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Just, way up, but. Yeah, it'd be actually probably a good talking point. Maybe we'll leave a little Q&A in the Spotify sort of below the episode. You guys can let us know your thoughts and who you think's at fault, because I'm sure it will be contentious. Obviously, we're kind of fairly in agreement, I'd say, that it's a racing incident, but Bagnaia is at fault. But I have seen plenty of people on the best website known to man, Twitter, saying that it was 100% Marc Marquez's fault. So, X, yes, it's called X now, x.com, the greatest website known to man, with the best opinions. They're all accurate 100% of the time. So, yeah, it's getting late. We are rambling now, so we probably should bring this one to a close. But a very, very interesting round. Definitely didn't expect some of these things to happen. Spices up the championship a little bit more. So we are now looking forward to Austin, because Marquez definitely going to want to strike back after that one. It's going to be a bit disappointing to have lost out on those points. And I would dare to say the passes on Bagnaia are going to probably get a bit more aggressive from now on. I feel like he's been leaving a little bit on the table with the Ducati riders, not to maybe upset them so much. But I feel like maybe now he'll be a bit closer when he goes to these passes in the future. But I guess we will find out. If you have enjoyed that episode, if you are listening on YouTube, do like the video. Or if you listen on Spotify, please do rate us 5 stars. It really does help us out. But we'll see you in 2 weeks' time for the America's GP at Austin.
3 weeks.